Welcome to another episode of DD on the Spot. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Johnson. And before I get to our guests here today, I'd like to remind everyone that if you enjoy this content, to please give a like and subscribe down below. I'd greatly appreciate it. We have Twila Keim on the podcast. She's coming to us all the way from Arizona. God, I'm so jealous right now, being that the weather is like it is right now in Minnesota. But she's an IFBB figure pro. She's a weightlifter. She's also a golfer, a yoga teacher, a lawyer, and a personal trainer. I mean, she basically does everything. I don't know if there's anything that she doesn't do. And she's also fit at 63. And I don't know if anyone will believe that she's 63. But then again, the benefits of working out and weight training are showed well. So before I get started, talking about your health and fitness journey, I got to ask, even though it pains me to say, what is the weather like in Arizona today?
It's about 70 and it's clear, not a cloud in the sky, and barely any wind. It's pretty much about 350 days of sun every year.
Well, it's great that you have that and, just enjoy it because I know she was telling me before everyone that she was from North Dakota. So believe me, she knows about the cold just like I do. So, it's good that you finally got out, but why don't you give us a little bit of a backstory on what inspired and what motivated you to get in shape and adapt this lifestyle?
Well, I have to tell you, I was pretty much an athlete from a young girl, and my first sport was probably water skiing when I was about 6. And my father, had a boat and we learned to ski because he skied. And then I was athletic pretty much all my life into elementary school, high school. I was, the state champion in the hurdles for 3 years in a row. And then I went to college and did marathons. But I started lifting weights when I was about 20. I had my first marriage was to a farmer, and I was telling you how I lived out on a farm. And I bought my first set of weights from the Penny's catalog, mail order catalog, back in the probably 1975. And I worked on that for about 10 years. I lifted in my basement with a bar and some plates. And then in 1984, so I found the gym. And so I just basically started lifting weights in a gym, 84. And then I went to law school in 95. So we've been all over the country. And I've always lifted. And then finally, when we settled in North Dakota, we went back into North Dakota in 2008. And then I was working out at the gym and I saw some girls who were talking about doing this bodybuilding competition. And I said, what's this all about? So, of course, I asked around and looked it up. And we ended up, my husband and I went to see one in Minneapolis, in Bloomington.
You probably went to my old high school because that's where they have all the old competitions. So yeah, that was my high school that I went to. So yeah, you went to go and see that show. So was that really your moment where you were just like, oh my God, this is awesome. I want to try this?
That's right. That was my moment. And I got home and I said, I'm going to do this because, and at that time I had just turned 55 when I saw my first NPC show down in Minneapolis. And so I found an old friend that I knew from way back who was a personal trainer, and we did an online training, show prep. But I tell you, I'm not the typical female, Ryan. I am kind of what you call a hard gainer. And so, there are people that are just metabolically very fast. And I'm one of them. I was born small. Grew up small. I'm going to be small. My mother's small. And so my problem was I had to put on muscle. And so I ended up, my trainer said, do not do any cardio, for 5 months.
So lucky.
And so I put on, a few pounds of muscle and I did my first show and I loved it. And I said, I'll do one to try it. And then after my first one, I said, I'm kind of hooked. And then the more shows I did, I was hearing about, the pro card. And then I said, this is interesting. So I did my first national show and I got third. And then I went back in 2014. And then I was in the 55 and over masters figure class. And that's when I got my pro card in 2014. But, my problem all along was just keeping muscle on. And of course, I did very little cardio except towards maybe the last few weeks when I had to cut a little bit. But so I'm just not really the typical person. But I guess it's, unique.
Which I mean, that's shocking to me because you look at some of her photos and she's in amazing shape and she's got a lot of muscle. So it's fascinating that it took you that long to put them on and really keep it. But I always love to ask because I mean, if you were to walk into a gym with 100 people, there's 100 different ways as to how those people got into shape. Whether it comes down to their diet, their nutrition, how many reps they do, what exercises they do. So many little things add up to the overall package. And being that you started, with your own weight set for a long amount of time, what was that experience like, sort of figuring out what worked best for you? Because I always compare it to sort of being like a mad scientist where you're just trying to concoct your own potion and figure out, what specifically works good for you.
Well, once I started getting serious about, going into the nationals, and then I did my pro show, I hired a guy from California. His name is Body Bio, Kim Odo, and he, trained a lot of figure and bikini girls. And I learned a lot from him because, um, for hypertrophy, which is what I needed, building size, I kind of stayed with his rep scheme of, 8, 10, 12, 8. And so I kind of worked with that. And then I learned more about time under tension. And so I just kind of experimented with that and followed his advice, and it worked out well. And now that I haven't done a pro show since 2015, and now I sort of just do my own thing. And I really like the time under tension, where my reps might last up to 90 seconds. I mean, my sets will last 90 seconds because I might do, a rep of 3 1 1 1 or something like that. So each rep is 6 seconds or more. I really find that gives me the best results right now.
Yeah. No, and I always preach time under tension too, because that's one thing that I knew a little bit about before I started this podcast, but ever since I had all these guests come on and preach about it, I started, and it really is amazing. So I highly recommend everyone to go and look that up and give it a try if you're interested. But I mean, I always love to talk genetics on this podcast because, especially in this day and age, so many people look at people on Instagram that they follow and they say, "Oh, I want his arms," or "I want her abs," or I mean, it's always constantly comparing yourselves to others when in reality you can only be the best version of yourself. And a lot of people don't realize that, genetics, they might just be born to look that way. Like you said, some people are hard gainers. Some people, I know a few guys where they can just touch one weight and then, they look instantly better, where it's so different for every single person. But I always say whenever someone starts working out, they always have that one body part that really, really takes off, that they sort of, don't have to train as much. And then they always have that one body part that just lags behind, that they have to train to oblivion to get it to catch up to everything else. I mean, I'll give you my examples first. My back, just because I worked so many warehouse jobs in college where you're lifting and loading stuff into trucks, and you either got a really nice back or you quit. But I'm also 6'3", so I mean, my legs and my lower body are just shot. Where I mean, I could train them every single day, just nonstop, and they wouldn't gain an ounce. I mean, I always said I could inject pure muscle into my calves, and they wouldn't gain anything. But what were those body parts for you when you were getting started?
Well, I think I naturally have biceps, my guns. I hardly ever have to train my
Give us
biceps.
a gun show. Give us a flex real quick. Look at that. 63 years old? Are you kidding me? That's ridiculous. Jeez.
Yeah, and I think my shoulders have a narrow frame, so my shoulders were the hardest for me to develop. And again, that's genetic too, because if you have a wide, base, long collarbones and bone structure, I mean, you're gonna, look a lot better. But for me, in figure and in all of the bodybuilding divisions, you need to have this inverted triangle look. You need to have a tiny waist and a wide upper body, and that for me was the hardest. The shoulders, back was okay. I could get some, pretty good width there, but and my legs have always been carrot legs, so there's just really no vastus lateralis, the quad sweep, but they're very muscular, but I just cannot get really any size. And so I'm really built like a distance runner, a long distance runner. And that's just the way I am, and it's not going to change.
I mean, that's why I love asking that question, because there's so many varying different types of bodies that we have on this podcast, and people that, muscles, gain more, lose more, but it so varies so much. And I love to ask that then, because it really just shows that, everyone is different. But out of, all the nutritional changes that you probably made when you started getting really into bodybuilding and this lifestyle, what would you say was probably the biggest nutritional change that you made?
I added a lot of protein, and it was tissue protein. So I didn't do a lot of supplements and the protein drinks. I had one maybe a day, but when I was training for my pro show, I had 18 egg whites a day, because my trainer said chicken, turkey, and I couldn't really have meat and eggs, and I was so tired of eating chicken, I just can't stand it. So I loved egg whites, so I made 18 every day, and I'd have six for breakfast, six for lunch, six in the afternoon, and then maybe something else at night. So, but I think the older you get, the harder it is for a body to assimilate the protein. So I kept on eating a lot of protein. And so still to this day, four egg whites every morning, plus a big bowl of oatmeal with, you know, I mean, I'm probably having at least 2,500 calories or more a day. And I still eat four meals a day and maybe a snack. Because I'm just, my workouts are intense and I've always needed carbs, a lot of carbs, but I still eat a lot of protein.
Well, I can say just from viewing some of her Instagram stories, I mean, she, for 63 years old, she's probably the best person at pull-ups for that age that I've ever seen. I mean, she has videos of her just repping them out like they're just like butter. I mean, that there's no effort at all. And then she has some even like weighted ones where I'm like, okay, at that age, just to be able to do even an assisted one for so many people is a really good accomplishment. But have you always been good at pull-ups, or is that something that you really developed into?
Well, I probably started when I was a child. We had a clothesline pole in the backyard. Remember those? Maybe not. Anyway, so it was made of, steel or iron, and I would just start pulling up on the clothesline pole and, just in elementary school. And then, I guess I kind of got going again when I was training for my competition shows. They are very good, to build the lats. And, in any of these bodybuilding divisions, you have to have a wide back. And so I started doing more and more of them. And, I have to tell you, I think a lot of it has to do with my body weight, which is, I'm on the slender side, ectomorph. And I think smaller structured people are better at relative strength moves like this. And stockier, bigger people, just are not as good as, in these relative strength body weight movements. So, I just started doing it. And I'm just, for some reason, I just am able to do them. I have very strong biceps. And, my back is, and I just don't have a lot of what I should call it dead weight. I don't have a lot of dead weight. And my body fat's fairly low. So I have a pretty good structure to move up and down.
Well, trust me, as someone who's 6'3", 210 pounds, yeah, I totally can vouch for the fact that yeah, it's a little bit harder for me, but I managed. But what's your record? How many have you been able to do in a row? Do you have a record?
Well, lately, I guess I can probably 15 body weight ones. But they're kind of boring, so I've, branched out and done, I did a couple of variations of triple stop, and I've done my 1 minute pull up and eccentrics, and because pull ups are ubiquitous.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's just so great. But I always say, whenever you're starting to go on a prep, just for the first time, you have to be in such a great amount of shape just to be able to go on a prep. That a lot of people don't realize that I mean, 95% of the general public wouldn't be able to. But when you're going on a prep, you are notching things up to an extreme when it comes down to, I mean, your diet has to be perfect. You have to get all of your workouts in. I mean, it just becomes such a scientific lifestyle. I mean, where literally you can't make any mistakes. What was that like for you the first time that you really got into a prep and just realized what you needed to do for it?
It was pretty intense, I have to say, and it was very time consuming. The food prep was just endless. I mean, for the amount of food that I had to eat. And then, of course, the workouts, he kept me at about an hour and 15 minutes. So it wasn't that bad. I probably did 5 days a week. He originally put me on 4 days. So it really wasn't bad for me. I think it's a lot worse now, a lot more intense now because it's just so competitive and everybody's getting so big. And I can't even imagine doing it again. And that's another reason why I stopped because it was just overwhelming and too much. And I had some injuries in my shoulders, and I said, it's just time to take a step back and just do my own thing. But yeah, it was intense.
And that's great too that you're able to do that, because so many people, I think, they just keep going on it, even though they know that it's might be hurting them, or that they might, have injuries. And it's nice that you knew when to get out, and that you're enjoying it now, because yeah, this lifestyle is supposed to be beneficial, and it's supposed to be good for you. I mean, if you do bodybuilding long enough, sometimes people can overdo it, and then it becomes a little unhealthy for them too. But I mean, I always say, just to be able to know the difference and to know the balance is really important as well. But we were talking about this prior to recording, because I always say this is a myth that I love to bust on this podcast, because unfortunately it still exists, but it has gotten better the last 5 years due to Instagram, where there are still so many women that believe that if they walk into the gym and they pick up one weight, they're going to put on 50 pounds of muscle overnight. And I always say to that, I'd spend my entire life savings to talk to you then. I mean, you'd be the biggest commodity of all time. Did you ever have that fear when you were getting started? And even if you didn't, I mean, being a personal trainer, I bet you hear this still all the time. How do you like to respond to that?
I never felt that would happen to me because I just knew it was just never going to be. I'm just not that type of person. But there are probably a few girls that genetically and I think hormone wise could put on some nice gains, and they have. And that was kind of something in the beginning that I wished I could do, and now I know it's just never going to happen for me. But I don't really hear that much about girls having that fear anymore, and especially when you get older, because the hormones are, diminishing. And for me now, as going forward, it's going to be very difficult for me to just maintain what I have. But, for somebody in their 20s and 30s who's still, at their peak, I suppose it's possible, but
Yeah.
rare.
Yeah. How have you found ways to mix it up so that you are still maintaining and keeping muscle as you age?
I love just experimenting with different things. I mean, a few months ago, I decided to just work on my squats and see how heavy I could get. I actually go to 3 gyms. I go to the LA Fitness when we first moved here, and I can go to any of them. And then I go to the Anytime Fitness, which is by my house. And then we joined the golf club, and they had a gym there too. So I can really go to 3, and they have all different kinds of things. And I'll mix things up. I just play around with different equipment, and um, just do what I can. I mean, I think the rep scheme is really big right now for me. And I finished all of my workouts with 2 scoops of whey protein.
Yeah. Well, that doesn't hurt too. I mean, I do that as well. That's a great thing to do. But yeah, it's like we're talking about, it's always constantly evolving. I mean, once you find out what works good for you, that might only last for a certain amount of time before you constantly have to, manipulate it and change it, which is something that I think is interesting about, this lifestyle. But being that one of the things that I find is so much more positive and affects women so much more, I'd say, than it does men when it comes to working out, is the confidence boost. Because we've heard so many stories on this podcast of women who have, just gotten so confident from working out, and it really just helps them maybe be a little bit more assertive, or it just helps them better their lives. And I always say that's the one thing that you can take from the gym and use to impact your life in a positive way. How have you been able to take that confidence boost and use it to benefit your life?
I have to tell you, I've never really lacked confidence. So, I mean, it is my place that I just love going to. It's I have to mock it's my safe space, my happy place. And I don't really have a confidence problem. And so it didn't really affect me one way or the other. I mean, I guess a lot of people would come up to me and say, "You look great." And that's kind of rare, because when somebody does look good, especially a girl, and then another girl comes up to tell them that, that's rare, because there's so much, competition. But so
Yeah, and that's awesome to have too, because I mean, we hear it's like half and half with that too, that we hear of all the time. So I just love to bring that up. But how long have you been in golfing?
I think I started taking a golf class in college. I went to a town called Valley City, North Dakota. That's where I went to college. And I took a class, and then I liked it. And then I bought some clubs and, dabbled in it for a while. But, there's a difference between playing golf and hitting golf balls on a golf course. And so over the years, I just, dabbled in it here and there. And then after I had my son, I didn't really play much. But when I retired in 2008, I had more time, and I took some lessons and upgraded my clubs, and I really like it. The problem with Arizona, it's so hot in the summer, and the sun is so intense, so you have to be really, careful about being outside too much.
I have a friend that lives there and he says, "Oh, come down and visit." And I was like, "Not during the summer." And he's like, "What? 115 degrees doesn't bother you?" And I was like, "Yeah, that might bother me a little bit, especially when you live on straight asphalt too and stuff. I don't want to really be walking on that. So yeah, I can't imagine what that's like." But when did you decide that you want to become a personal trainer into your journey? When did you have your moment where it's like, "Oh, helping out others, that seems like something that I would really enjoy."
Well, it was back when I lived in North Dakota. I started working out at my first gym, and it's not there anymore, but I started working and teaching some aerobics classes, and the owner of the business was, just really way before everybody else's time. She just was so knowledgeable. So she encouraged some of us, and I was hired there to get our personal training exams taken. And so that was probably, I think it was 1991, I got my ACE personal training. And so that was way back then. And, I didn't have a steady stream of clients because I did other things. I was working, and it was basically just to get the test, to, get the knowledge base and use it if I, wanted to, later. So I had some clients over the years, but I'm not a regular trainer. I basically did it kind of for myself.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, and that's great too. That, I mean, you just have that just in your back pocket, just in case you ever need it. But
yeah.
two of the questions that I love to ask, every guest that I have on, there's so many positive things that happened to me when I really started working out and really getting in shape. But one of the negatives is that you're going to get asked to move a lot of people's furniture. You're going to get asked to open a lot of pickle jars or bottled water or anything that's sealed on tight. You're the go-to strength person. I'm still at home for the next 2 months before I move out, and every single time my parents come home with groceries, I basically have to lift the car into the driveway and carrying the groceries, being the good son that I am. Have you found that, I mean, just based on the way that you look and the way that you train, that sometimes people might assume or might ask you to do favors for them?
I haven't had that, no. But I've moved, 7 times in the past, well, 20 years. And so I've moved a lot of boxes, carried a lot of furniture. So it comes in handy. That's called functional training.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, I cannot tell you. I mean, being a guy and being 6'3", I mean, I could have zero muscle at all, and I'd still get asked that all the time. So that's one thing that I mean, I'll do it for you, but it's just it got to a point where I was just getting asked, every other weekend. But I mean, it leads me on perfectly to, let's be honest, you are not the average looking 63-year-old woman. And if you go outside, dressed like the way that you are right now, I mean, you could get stares. I mean, I always say you somewhat become like a mini celebrity where people just get so fascinated and they're like, "Oh, that's incredible." And it boggles people's minds sometimes. What has that been like for you, just adjusting to the fact that you might draw a lot more attention than normal if you go out in public? Have you gotten used to that?
I don't think I do. I don't think I attract any attention. I mean, the I'm 63. I'm not a young chick anymore. I mean, there's
That's even
you
more impressive though. That seeing someone that's 63 who looks like that. I think people at like grocery stores or whatever, they might be like, "Oh wow, she looks amazing" or something like that. I mean just like saying like, "Wow, that's," or like people come up and like give you compliments and stuff like that all the time. Have you experienced any of that?
No, because I don't look. I mean, I don't flash my age. I don't have I'm 63 on my.
Oh no, no, I know, but just saying like, "Wow, you look." I mean, like, you look amazing for any age. So I mean, just saying that and coming up and being like, "Wow, what do you train for this?" Like that's one thing that I found when I was in a lot better shape than I am now, because now that I have a full time job and I do this, I still work out, but not nearly as much. But I just you used to go and get up and get asked all the time like, "What do you train for?" Whatever. What? Wow, you look amazing. So that's why I asked that question for all the guests. But do you feel though at all? I mean, when it comes to also like being out in public, do you feel that you have a lot more confidence too? I mean, even though you said you weren't lacking in the confidence department, but I mean, looking the way that you look, I think you might have a little bit more confidence, or at least knowing me, I might have a little more confidence.
I don't feel that I get asked that very much. That you look great. Maybe in the gym, but I don't think so. I don't feel I do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that might be even better, because some people we have on talk about how, like being like a mini celebrity where they can't really go out in public without, getting attention drawn to them. So that actually might work out better for you. But you mentioned that you love time under tension training. And I mean, I always love to ask this whenever a guest mentions that. Could you explain maybe to our guests? I'm just going to pretend that I don't know anything about time under tension, but could you explain to our guests, or to our listeners, I should say, what time under tension is and how you use it?
Well, time under tension is the amount of time that you have your muscle working, during a repetition. And of course, we all know that it's, you have the positive and the negative, and then you have the pauses. And so I make use of all four of those time periods to keep my muscle under tension. So for instance, if you're doing a bicep curl and you maybe do 4 seconds to curl it in and then a pause, maybe 2 seconds and really squeeze, and then maybe 4 or 6 seconds to for the eccentric part, and then that final pause isn't really key. But no, that final pause also prevents you from swinging the weights, from using that momentum, which I think a lot of people do. You see that in the gym, they're just swinging, they're just going through the motions, and they're not working the muscle. And I think that's a lot, the yoga comes into play here too. It's this mind muscle connection, like yoga is mind body connection. But you just have to, I just love the feeling of, being strong for 6 seconds, and up to over a minute. So that has been just, and I read about it probably, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, an author that I like to read, and I heard about it from him, and then I tried it. But, there's many ways to build muscle, and of course, that's for me, that's what it always has been. I build muscle and try to keep it on.
I feel like so many of our listeners hear so many people say that mind muscle connection. What do you mean when you say that? Because a lot of people I think like, oh, am I just supposed to like control it or really feel it through my brain? A lot of people, and I think it's a skill that you develop as you go on in your training. Like obviously you're not going to have it immediately, but what do you mean when you say mind muscle connection?
Well, for me, it's if I can, I look at the muscle and I have zero distractions in my mind. I'm just completely focused on working the muscle through the range of motion that's good for me, and just 100% concentration on that in your breathing. It's a lot like yoga, and just no distractions, and getting the blood flow in there, and just taking that time. And
Do you think that doing yoga does help you too also when it comes to building muscle and maintaining this lifestyle?
no, it actually the bodybuilding part is doing the opposite effect. So you need them to balance. The more muscular you get, the less flexible I became. So they really work out that I have to have the yoga if I keep the weightlifting, and and I think a lot of people will tell you that too. It's just kind of hard to keep both, be really good at both. But again, they all come in handy for my golf.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say, yeah, working out that definitely comes in handy for golf, and yoga definitely does as well. But I mean, I just had a poll since we're getting close, or since we are past New Year's by a couple of weeks, and I always said, what's one body part that everyone is looking to grow more? And I had, arms, abs, thighs, back, and everyone chose arms, more than anything else by far. And we saw that obviously you have awesome arms. So what do you do for your arms, and what do you recommend for people just when trying to build arms? Because I think for so many people that is like their go-to, what they want to have more than anything else.
You mean you're talking just the arms in general, or everything?
We could do like biceps and triceps. Yeah, that's what I mean when I mean arms, like bis and tris. So like, what do you do for those to get them to look the way that they look?
Well, I think when I work my back, a lot of my back movements are the complex, they're the multi-joint exercises. So I think with the pull-ups, if you do, like this bi style, you'll get the benefit there, and like inverse pulls. But a lot of my complex exercises will get the biceps, and then of course at the end, I started something new, kind of doing a partial, because my elbows are very, well, I have to say my right one has a little golfer's elbow, so I have to be careful of that tendon there. So when I lift heavy biceps, if I do a full rep, it's hard on my elbows. So I started doing a partial, but I would do an eccentric isometric. So I would start up and then I would go down just on the first part and go down just barely below 45, or let's see, 45, 90 degrees. And then you pause there. So if you go all the way down, it just hurts my elbows. So I go heavy, iso, eccentric is what I've been doing now. And then finish with a lightweight, maybe high bicep curls. I like triceps. I love doing dips, and I like body weight dips or assisted dips. But my arms are kind of small. They're muscular, but they're small. And of course I love cables, and but I think the EI partials are working for me now.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we clearly can tell that they're working. And I mean, I always say, if anyone can get any advice on how to, maintain or grow a body part, I love asking that. But are you one of those people where you like to set goals for like, oh, I want to lift this much with this, or I want to do this many reps? Do you like to write down goals, or do you just go to the gym and just say, hey, I just want to, work out and make sure that I'm, maintaining this lifestyle?
I'm probably in between. I've never been one to say I want to get a personal record on this and this or that. That's not me because that's more powerlifting, and that rep scheme is just not really safe for me. So I like, more higher reps, but like I said, a long time under tension. Like I said, I did try working on my squats a few months ago, and then I tore my hamstring tendon, and that was kind of weird. So I'm working on that back, and I'm, back onto my squats, and I want to be able to put up. Well, I put up a 45-pound plate on each side. But and I don't think you have to have goals for personal records and everything. I think at my age now, I think it's just time to just stay strong. And there's, as a personal trainer, there are these 5 components of fitness, muscular strength, muscular endurance, body composition, flexibility, and cardiovascular. So that's all fine and dandy. But now there are these skills that I love doing, like agility and mobility and the balance and reaction time. And those are I just started learning about those, and those are fascinating to me. Like the animal flow is fun. So now I think 2020, I'm just going to kind of branch out and try new things and still do my lifts and my yoga, but just kind of work on some more of the fitness skills, I think we call them. Like the other day, I don't know if you saw that, but I pick up my golf ball with my putter and flip it up in the air, and just little things like that. And my husband will throw like a tennis ball at me, but I won't even know, and I'll just try to grab it. So just things like that are fun.
Yeah. No, and yeah, it's always, and plus throwing the tennis ball. I mean, that keeps your attention. I mean, I can guarantee that would for me too as well. But if we were to talk to you a year from today, do you have any goals in mind of like what you'd want to, where you'd want to be at in your life, or what you want to have achieved, or are you just taking things by ear right now?
Yeah, I don't really have any long-term goals. I would like to just keep on working on my golf game. I would like to not get hurt, so I'm going to kind of tone my, heavy lifting back down. No, I just feel like I want to be alive in a year and healthy. And my mother is 88, and she has severe scoliosis and kyphosis, and she's very small. And my goal is to not have her physique. So that's why I'm taking estrogen, which is probably what some of the girls are. I don't know how many girls are going through menopause, but that's a big deal to keep your bones, healthy and strong. And I do not want to have osteoporosis.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and that's one of the big benefits of weight training too, is that it does prevent, issues like that, osteoporosis and all those other things. But we, like I said before, we are 2 weeks past New Year's, and it's that time of the year where everyone floods the gym with their New Year's resolutions, and I get a little sad, thinking about it, because there's been studies, only 15 to 20% of people actually accomplish their resolution goals. So many people just give up, and there's always that saying, in February the gym's the emptiest it'll ever be, so that's when you should really go and start if you're really thinking about doing that. But what advice do you have for people that are just getting started, especially with their New Year's resolutions, so that they can maintain and keep those? Because I find for so many people, they just tend to either overdo it or they psych themselves out.
You know, I don't really know. I can't really relate to that because I've never been in that situation where I don't want to go to the gym. I guess it really comes from within. How much do you really want it? Um, and I know there's a big flood, and probably by February it thins out. It is. I don't know if anybody can tell anybody anything about that. It all is individual, and what your goal, what your own individual, time frame is, and what you want. And it's discipline. It's just discipline, and some people do not have discipline, self-discipline. You know that, and others do.
How important is it to you too to be setting that positive example for so many people, just, I mean, with your Instagram page, and really proving that you can be in shape at any age? How much of that do you use as motivation when it comes to still working out and still doing this, knowing that you are inspiring so many people?
I guess some. I mean, Instagram is very time consuming. And it's not a real productive use of my time, so I kind of limit it, as much as I can. I hope I'm reaching some people out there. I don't have a lot of followers, but I'm hoping that if people see me, they'll, even if they just see me and not like anything, good. I just do it for me, and I'm not really I don't really care.
Well,
If you say that.
I mean, and that's a great attitude to have too, because so many people they value their life based on how many followers they have or how much influence they have. But then just say, what, screw it. If people want to follow me, they can follow me, and if they enjoy it, they'll enjoy it. I love that. That's the similar attitude that I have. So I really appreciate that because so many of my guests that I had on, I mean, you can tell that they value their life on that. So that's just that is honestly a great attitude to have, especially in this day and age with technology. But what was your family's reaction when you really started getting in shape? Were they really supportive of it, or were they kind of just they didn't really care?
I don't think they really knew what I was doing as far as preparing for a bodybuilding contest. Um, my husband was completely supportive, and my son, and they were okay with it. But the rest of them, I don't think they really knew much about bodybuilding and what it took. But I didn't get any negatives from them at all. But I think pretty much neutral. But my husband went to every show with every competition with me. Flew out to Pittsburgh 3 times, and then and he would be my lifting partner in the gym to get some forced reps, for me and assist with me. So he was just absolutely fantastic.
That's awesome. And if you could change one thing about the health and fitness lifestyle, what would it be?
Oh, I hate to say this, but like the bodybuilding, I think there needs to be less emphasis on getting big. And I don't know what about the men's vision, but that's another reason that I think the bodybuilding scene for me was I thought it was going to be a healthy endeavor, but then the more I got into it, I could see that it wasn't. And then you would hear girls and guys talk about things at the shows, and I said, this is just not for me. And I didn't really know much about the natural shows, but if I could do it over again, I would have done the natural because we're competing against people who are enhancing, and then some of us that aren't. And so I would probably like to see more exposure of that and try to get people back to the way it used to be.
Yeah. Yeah, honestly, I mean, for anyone out there, I mean, it's almost impossible to be a pro without doing something. I mean, there are some cases where it happens, but I mean, it's very very hard because it's just so saturated with people who are just doing God knows what, and it really is, yeah, if they could just take it back to a little bit more and just tone it down a little bit because yeah, I mean, if it keeps up the way it's going, I mean, I don't even want to know what it's going to look like in 10 years then if it keeps going at the state that it's going on. But how have your workouts changed since you stopped bodybuilding? Have you just has the intensity gone down a little bit, or do you still train as intense?
Well, I still do a 5 day split because then I can get every body part and I hit it really hard. And but no, it's not near as intense. But I still like to do 4 to 5 days. I probably don't do chest quite as much, but legs and back and bi and shoulders and abs. So it's about the same. I like to get in 4 to 5 days, but not quite as intense. I mean, I won't do 22 sets on a day. It might be 15.
Do you incorporate cardio now?
Pardon me?
Do you incorporate cardio now?
Oh, absolutely not.
Yep.
I don't do any cardio. I do HIIT, and I might do 1 or 2 sessions, maybe a week, 12 minutes. I just do 45 minutes and a minute rest. But now that is a very interesting concept. This HIIT has so many benefits. I mean, the reason I like doing it is because it's got this. You get a spike of the human growth hormone, your own naturally, which for me, of course, is good. I mean, because you only get human growth hormone from sleeping, and then fast, this intermittent fasting, and then the HIIT. So I think that's one of the main reasons that I do it.
And believe me, I love it that you don't do cardio. I mean, because me too. I mean, I'm one of those people where if you get me running on a treadmill, I mean, the only cardio that I ever do is bike rides after some workouts. But now I know it's way too cold for that. But you brought it up. Sleep, I always say, is the most underrated thing that is never talked about on Instagram. Not too many people talk about it at all, but it is the most important thing when it comes to recovery. It's one of the most, if not the most important thing, just in general, whether you have a healthy and fit lifestyle or not. But what's your sleep schedule look like? How do you try to maintain that? Because for so many people, especially when you really try to get in shape, your sleep needs to be so much more on point than just your average Joe just sitting around. What have you done for your sleep schedule?
Well, I try to have it 7 to 8 hours. I mean, my husband can sleep 9, but lucky him, I'm jealous. But if I can get 7 hours a night, I'm good. And when I was training really hard, my trainer would say, "Well, take this recovery powder." And I said, "Well, I think a nap would work better for me." So I took a nap, maybe 20 minutes. But I think if you can get a nap, take a nap, and like sometimes, a little melatonin works if I'm having trouble. But I also found that if I work out too late in the evening, I cannot sleep because my muscles are just too active. So I try to get my workouts in around noon or a little bit after or before that.
No, the melatonin has been a huge game changer for me too as well. I mean, I cannot tell you how many times I've taken it now where, 15 minutes later I am just absolutely knocked out, and I mean, there's just
You're
so many.
thinking vividly.
Yeah, it's bad. It's bad, but I love it so much. But I mean, there's just so many positive things that do with this lifestyle. But I always love to ask people that are trainers or that they help out others. What's that feeling like? Because we have so many stories on here, and just looking on Instagram, you see so many stories of people. Oh, this is my weight loss journey, but we never get to understand what that feels like for the person that's behind that. What is that feeling like for you, knowing that you really helped out someone and you made their life change for the better?
Well, again, I can only do so much for these people, and it all just comes from whether they have the attitude and the discipline to want to do it for themselves. I mean, I can only do so much. I can just tell them what program. I mean, all these fitness components are programmable, testable, measurable, but they have to have the willpower and the discipline. But you just do what you can, and it's all up to them.
Mhm. What would you say the general public? What would you say probably the biggest misconception that people in the general public have about female bodybuilding these days?
Misconception? I don't know if the public really knows much about women's bodybuilding. Do you? I mean, I think it's kind
Not
of rare.
not really. I think it is kind of rare. Where not too much, but I think so many people just have so many just stereotypes where they just believe, you might be like all about yourself, or you might not be, as concentrated on other things because it is such an intense lifestyle. But yeah, there aren't really that many because I don't think it's that well spread. But I mean, I think it's taking off just a little bit now, and it's getting a little bit more popular. But yeah, I don't know.
I think when you say bodybuilding, I think that most people don't understand that there's physique, there's figure, there's bikini, there's fitness, and like the bikini and some of the figure. I mean, they're still a little bit more healthier looking, and you can't tell if somebody's a bikini competitor or not because they look fairly normal, which is nice. And some of the figure girls that are natural, I mean, they look ordinary. So I think people just don't understand how it's a very unique thing, and there are all these divisions and everybody has to do a different thing to compete in those divisions. So I just don't know if too many people know much about it. I mean, my family didn't.
Well, one of the last few questions that I like to ask is, if there's any, females out there listening to this who have, an interest in starting in bodybuilding, what piece of advice do you have for them when it comes to getting their journey started when it comes to bodybuilding? Like they might already be in great shape, but they're just thinking about maybe doing a show. Is there anything that you'd like to give them advice wise when it comes to that?
Boy, I just, talk to people, go to shows and see what they're about, find a very reputable trainer. Probably don't do it on your own to start. Just find, there are some good ones out there. You have to, invest some money into it, but just all those things. Get a great suit designer. Find out what color works for you. I was allergic to the spray tanning products, so that's probably something they need to figure out too, or try some spray tans and see if they break out. Just there's a lot to this before somebody decides to compete, and it took me a few shows to figure it all out. But definitely get somebody that knows what they're doing on nutrition, and it's trial and error. I mean, if you hire a trainer that doesn't know you, it's all trial and error for the first few months.
No, it absolutely is, and that's why I love to bring that up. And now, lastly, I mean, being that I'm in Minnesota and it's hard to find ways to work out when it's this cold outside, especially if you don't have like a gym inside your house. But when it gets that hot in Arizona, where it's like 110, 120 degrees, I would not ever want to leave my house. Do you tend to just work out at home then, or how do you find that motivation when it's that hot? Because you wouldn't even catch me walking a step outside.
Well, this is interesting, Ryan, because it's kind of similar to being in North Dakota. So in North Dakota, you put on your hat, your boots, your mittens, you drive your car, you get out, you walk 100 feet to the gym. Same with in Arizona. You just, put on a hat, put on a cover up, you park your car, you walk 100 feet to the gym, you come 100 feet back to your car and you go home. I stay in a lot. A lot of us get up early, and if anybody wants to do anything outside, they're up at 5 in the morning, 6, 7. And if I do golf, it's very early, like we might start at 7 in the morning and we're done by 10, and it might be 90, 95 when we're done. You know, the hot temperatures are usually around 4 in the afternoon, so it's not too bad in the morning. But no, I don't have any problem going to the gym all year round.
Do you find maybe that it might be harder to like gain muscle then? Because if you're sweating all the time, I'd imagine that you might be like losing water weight a lot more frequently.
We do drink water. It's just at least a gallon a day, drinking all the time. I mean, I have water with me all the time. No
Yeah,
question.
I can imagine that. And now, lastly, before we wrap things up, is there anyone that you'd like to give a shout out to?
Well, if I suppose my son Griffin, if he would ever watch, because he's a podcast, master, and that's probably about it.
What's the
Griffin.
title of his podcast? I can give it a plug on here.
Oh my gosh, it is Boss Barrel.
Boss Barrel. Okay.
Boss Barrel, yes.
All right. I'll leave a link down to that down below too. I mean, I love promoting people and all that stuff. So yeah, everyone go and check it out. He does video games. So I know probably a lot of people I listen to are into that as well. So I highly recommend going and checking it out. And again, we cannot thank you enough for coming on and sharing your story. And it's just an incredible story. And just keep doing what you're doing and keep inspiring people to get in shape, and yeah, just keep posting what you're doing, because it's just so fascinating, and you're just such an inspiration. And again, thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, Ryan. I appreciate it.
Well, I couldn't think of a better way to end it than you embarrass us even more. Could you give us a front double bicep and we can just say, "Oh my God, she's 63." Oh my God, everyone, 63 years old, and that's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, you gotta get permits for those in Arizona, basically. But again, you guys, we cannot thank her enough for coming on. Go and give her a follow. I'll leave a link to her Instagram page down below. And this is Ryan Johnson, DD on the spot, signing out. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.